Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to talk about grad school. Should you go and what are the benefits? As you can see, I'm wearing my Johns Hopkins University t-shirt because that's where I went to grad school. And I realized as I was planning this video out that there's actually two parts. So this is part one, why I went to grad school and what my experiences were like. And in part two, which I'll film probably sometime next year, I'll talk about what happened after I graduated from grad school. It seems pretty fitting because I graduated in 2015. So next year in 2025 will mark 10 years since I graduated. And, we'll talk about that later. But this first part is going to talk about why I went and what were the benefits and what were the cons. So without further ado, hi, my name is Christina. I'm a genre bending literary writer and welcome to my channel. So 15 years ago, I was on the train heading towards downtown Washington, D.C. It was 2009 and I was tentatively getting back into writing. Just a quick recap, I'll tell you that in 2008, I pretty much quit writing. I had written a novel. I had tried for years to get it published. Nothing happened. I bottomed out. And so I said, okay, I'm not doing this anymore. And then in 2009, it was the first time that I had ever lived truly by myself. No parents, no roommates. And so living by myself, I realized number one, that I was someone who really did want to be a writer. And number two, I had to figure out why I had failed at trying to publish this novel. And what I kind of realized was that even though I had written short stories and I had read a bunch of books, here are a bunch of them right here, on writing, and I had even taken some classes at the local community center, the writing center, I actually hadn't devoted a lot of time to writing. I didn't have any kind of schedule. I didn't have a community of writers to talk to. I just was kind of just drifting. And I felt like some structure and a clear goal was what I needed in order to get my writing back on track. So in 2009, I did some research about the various writing programs that I could think of. Now, just to pull back a little bit, I graduated from undergrad in 1999, and I had thought to myself, well, maybe in a couple years I'll think about grad school. And I did. I thought about it in the early 2000s, and what I realized was that a lot of programs only wanted literary writers. And I knew I was not a literary writer. I was a genre writer. And it was really disappointing. And I had tried to get into Clarion a couple of times and got rejected. So I kind of gave up on it. But I revisited it in 2009, and I had a very, very strict criteria for what program I was going to be interested in. Number one is the genre. It had to be a genre-friendly program. And Johns Hopkins at the time, for their master's degree, not their MFA, but their master's degree, their MA program, which is what I had, they had a little snippet on their website that said that they would welcome all writing so long as you were interested in learning the craft of writing, which is what I wanted. I wanted character and plot and themes and structure and those kinds of things. I just wanted to be able to write genre stuff, and they were okay with that. The second thing was that it was 2009. We were in the middle of the Great Recession. I was not trying to go back into debt to Sally Mae. I had worked hard in my 20s to get debt free, and I had been debt free for 3 years. You could not convince me to take out another Sally Mae loan. So that wasn't happening. So I needed a degree program that was not going to put me back into debt. And that kind of worked out, but we'll get to that later. And the third thing was I really didn't want to leave the DC area. I liked living there, and I still live in the DC area, and I wasn't interested in going to the other side of the country where I knew nobody and I had no friends and no family connections or anything like that. So I was really, hoping that I could find something that would work for me for all three of those. But if I had any flexibility, it was going to be location. If somebody gave me a full ride scholarship to go to Vermont, I was going to Vermont. Look out, Ben and Jerry's, here I come. But that did not happen. I did not move to Vermont. I found the Johns Hopkins program just Googling it. I realized I had actually worked briefly down the street from their campus. And I was like, "Oh, I didn't even know that was there." But it was. And 15 years ago, I went to a exploratory, or no, not really exploratory, but more like a question and answer seminar that they had about the program. And David Everett, who has since passed away, but he stood up there and he laid it out what the expectations were, what the cost was, how you took the program, and how to apply, and all of those things. And I remember riding back on the train and saying to myself, you could really do this. You could absolutely do this. It is affordable. So maybe you should just go for it. I didn't tell anybody I was applying to grad school. I didn't ask anybody's advice. I just decided that that was what I was going to do. And my plan was to pull out short stories that I had written over the years, find the best one, polish it up, and send it in with my application. You didn't need to take any test scores. They didn't do test scores, no GMATs or anything, in order to get into the program. And I would see if I could get in. And that was my plan, although life had other plans. A few months later, I went into the doctor's office, and the doctor told me that I had a fibroid tumor and I needed surgery. So 6 weeks later, I'm getting wheeled into the OR, and I spent the rest of the summer recovering. Also, the day I got out of the hospital, my grandfather passed away. And I was disappointed that I didn't get to go to the funeral, but my doctor was not going to clear me to get on a plane right after surgery. So I did not go to my grandfather's funeral. But my grandmother understood and she had no problem with it. No, everybody was like, not an issue. My grandfather had been sick for a while. It wasn't a sudden shock. Although it's always a shock. But, um, you know, uh, that happened. And then unfortunately, later on that year, my grandmother passed away. And that was not planned. So 2 deaths in my family and major surgery, it just wiped me out emotionally. And I could not even think about grad school. But in early 2011, I started to revisit it and I decided that I was going to go ahead and apply. So I applied in the spring of 2011 and I got in, and I started in the fall of 2011. In a way, it was a good idea to delay a year. I was able to save up a ton of money so I could just cash flow my degree. Since it was a part time program, I could keep my 9 to 5 job and I just went to classes on the weekends and in the evening. So I got to keep my nice, steady paying job with health insurance, and I kept contributing to my retirement accounts. And I also, because I was debt free, I could put money aside to pay for my classes. And I just took one class a semester at a time. And that worked out pretty well. I did end up going into debt because my nice steady job did furlough me and cut my pay by 10% towards the end of my degree. But I have paid off that debt since then. And I did not go into debt for Sally Mae. So that girl wasn't getting no more of my money. So, in terms of cost, it was actually, for me, affordable. And I've talked to a few of my other friends, and they took the program for the same reason. It was affordable for them, and they could keep their job. They could, do it in the evenings. And not have to constantly take off time of work and that kind of thing. So if you are thinking about going to grad school and cost is a concern, you may want to think about a part time program or what they call low residency. That means most of your classes are online and then you just go to that school for like a few days or a week once a semester to meet with, your professors. And those are great cost saving opportunities. You don't necessarily have to do a traditional MFA where you are a full-time student and you take on a crap ton of debt. There have been plenty of articles written by people who went to very prestigious schools and they were full-time students and they graduated with 50, 60, $75,000 or more worth of debt for a degree that doesn't necessarily lead to a higher paying job. Getting an MFA in writing or an MA in writing, in my case, didn't necessarily mean that like I was suddenly credentialed to make more money in publishing. And I know some people who have used that to go ahead and start teaching, and maybe that was paying more money than before, but it's not a guarantee. It's not like law school where you go to law school and you get out and you pass the bar and boom, you're a lawyer. Getting an MFA can kind of go either way. So if you're thinking that I'm going to go to grad school and get my a master's in writing and I'm going to graduate making 100K in a job, I don't think that's going to happen. You should go to grad school because you want to write and you want time devoted to writing, but it doesn't necessarily lead to more money. And honestly, that's why I went to grad school. I didn't go because I wanted a higher paying job. I went to grad school because I wanted to really work on my craft. It's a pretty indulgent thing. I didn't have children. I didn't have anybody depending upon me. I cash flowed it for the most part. So for me, it wasn't a huge risk. For some people, it may be, especially if you're somebody who already has debt from your undergrad or you're solely responsible for somebody else. This is really a degree that you take because you can. Yeah, and I don't regret it. I think it was one of the best things I ever did. But I also know that for some people, this may, really throw a wrench in your financial plans. So be really careful when you're thinking about this. In terms of what I got out of grad school while I was there, I will say that when my first class started, I was really intimidated. Really. There were people who had already published books and people who were writing articles for magazines and people who were talking to literary agents. And I was like, I haven't had anything published. I write a blog. That's it. But I had the desire to write. I had this need to write, and I was there to soak up everything. So when I started my first class, I was like a sponge. I just soaked up everything. And as the years went on, I got more confident with my writing. I started getting more ideas about the type of stories I wanted to write. And I wasn't really concerned with getting published. But around 2013, I had a professor say to me, are you submitting your stories? And I said, no, I'm not really. I'm just sort of just writing. And she said, I think you should start submitting. I think it's time. You have your voice, you have your own style. She was pointing to a particular story that I wrote. She said, this is your confidence in writing. This is ready to go. This could be published. And so I started submitting and getting the rejection letters and doing all the things. And that story, it did eventually get published. It was my short story, Future Virtual Love, which was published in 2018. I think that for me, grad school really solidified who I am as a writer. It gave me the confidence to write with my own unique voice. You're going to find, especially if you're a genre writer, that you're going to run into people that are not exactly gung ho about the kinds of stories that you write. And that's a benefit of grad school, too. There is value in people who have no skin in the game, whether or not you succeed or fail, reading your work and reacting to it. Some people are going to be positive, some people are going to be negative, and you have to figure out with your own instincts and who you are as a writer whether or not this critique is valuable or it's useless. And that only comes with experience. I clearly remember being 23 and being in a local writing class, and this lady saying, "You should just get rid of all this supernatural stuff in your story and write a real story." Because anything that wasn't American confessionalism literary writing wasn't real writing to her. But I had to deal with that. And I, of course, ignored her and just wrote what I wanted to write. But it's definitely something that you need to experience as a writer. I did a whole video on rejection earlier, and this is another form of that. There are people who are just not going to get you as a writer, and you need to be able to navigate that, especially when you start mailing your stories out, because people will start giving you ideas for stories that you don't really want to write. You're like, no, I don't want to write that. Or they've judged you because you wrote a story about a vampire, or you wrote a story about a zombie, which have been done to death. So going to grad school and having people react to your writing who wouldn't normally read that type of writing, or who are super fans and do read that kind of writing, can be very, very, very useful as a writer. And I enjoyed getting people's reactions. Most people, when they read my stuff, their reaction was, "I don't normally read this, but I like this." And I was like, okay, I can take that. But other times, there were people who just didn't get it. And you have to be able to let that just roll right off your back and say, okay. And for some reason, you might bump into people who have professional jealousy. That's probably a whole nother video, but I have experienced feeling professional jealousy and having it reflected back on me. And that's a whole thing, but you do have to navigate that. Sometimes critique groups can be brutal. Sometimes those critique groups can be really unprofessional. And luckily, I didn't really have that experience too badly, but I know some people who did, and they're still a little salty about it to this day. But they also didn't let it stop them from writing. If you really believe in your work, even if somebody says, "Well, I don't really get this. I don't understand it. I mean, it's just," you go, "Okay, it's not for you." And you move on and you keep it moving. And all of that came from grad school. Me locking in on who I am as a writer, my voice, dealing with criticism, and learning from other writers, maybe even writers that don't write the same stuff that you write. That can definitely open your eyes. My critique group now that I have is built from everyone that I went to grad school with, and none of them write like I do. We all have very different ideas about what our voice is and our style is, but at the same time, we appreciate all the differences. And I personally think that's why we work. We learn from each other, and we learn how to do our own voice without directly stealing from each other. And I wouldn't steal from my fellow critique group members. They're wonderful writers, but they're not me. And I think that the only way that that is possible is because I know who I am as a writer to my core. And that came with years and years of experience of sitting in front of people who had no skin in the game and having them tell me what they thought about my stuff. I know it's scary, but sometimes it needs to happen. And it's not as scary as you think it is. I actually got a lot of people who were very, very kind to my writing and gave me great feedback that I used to become a better writer. And not gonna lie, I got published while I was in grad school too. I knew someone who was running an anthology. She loved my writing and said, "Hey, contribute to my anthology." And I said, "Okay." And that's how I got my first fiction writing credit. So you do make connections. You do meet people who go on to get their books published, get their short stories published. I know quite a few people that have gone on to see their first novels get published, novels that they workshopped while we were all in grad school. So I feel like there's definitely a community, there's a sense of belonging. It's really fun. If you're somebody who's not around a lot of writers, it's really fun to be around a lot of writers. You know, that was one of the best things was that everybody was there basically for the same reason. Maybe some people were there because they wanted to, write that New York Times bestseller, and I'm not mad at them for that. But as someone who doesn't have any other writers in her life, being around writers all the time was definitely for me invigorating. I can't speak for everybody else. Maybe some people thought it was annoying, but I actually thought it was great. And grad school is different than undergrad. Everybody in grad school is hopefully on the same page, wanting the same type of thing. It's a little different in undergrad because you're in classes with people who are in different majors and doing different stuff with the same major that you are. But in grad school, everybody I met wanted to get published. Everybody wanted to go further with their writing. And that can be a benefit. Yeah. The cons probably most obviously is money. It's a lot of money for a lot of programs. I think collectively I spent maybe around $25,000. But remember, I was working full time the whole time that I was in grad school. And, it can be more. I also think one of the cons is that it doesn't really lead to a higher paying job necessarily. So if that's a goal for you, I would really, really rethink it. And some people worry that they're going to go and they're going to end up writing like everybody in their program. I didn't really worry about that, to be honest. Having been through the program, I realized that the only way to stop yourself from doing that is to just keep writing. Keep writing after school. Once you're done your classes and you've already graduated, know who you are as you go into the program. I think that was one of the benefits. Also, I don't think I mentioned this, but the average age at my school was 32 years old. So, and I started at 34. Most people who were in this program were in their mid to early 30s, into their 40s, into their 50s. There were even some people in their 60s. There were not a lot of people who were, let's say, under 25. There were a couple, but most people were older and kind of more established into their lives, married. Some people had kids. So, this was not exactly a program of people who were really like, just trying to start adulthood. We had been in adulthood and we decided that we liked writing. So we were going to do it. And yeah, so that was pretty much my experience at Johns Hopkins. And if you have any questions, feel free to write them in the comment section. Like I said, I'll do a part 2 where I talk about what happened after I graduated in 2015, basically 2015 to 2025, and all of that goodness and badness. There was some tough stuff too. But for the most part, I think that it is definitely worth your time. And good luck to you. Find a great program that suits what you need. And look, if you can't find a program, don't feel like it's never going to be possible and I have to put myself into, a box. Give it time. Your writing may change, or there may be a program that you didn't even know about. Like, I didn't even know about the Johns Hopkins program when I first started looking in my early 20s. So I would recommend that when you decide to apply, really be sure of the program. look up the professors too, see what they're publishing, and don't feel like you must do this in order to be a writer. There are plenty of writers that never went to grad school. Heck, there are plenty of writers that never even went to undergrad. Having a degree does not make you a writer. Writing makes you a writer, and you can get published without a college degree. All you have to do is know who you are as a writer, hone your craft. I recommend tons of these books to inspire you and help you be a better writer. So don't feel like you must go to grad school in order to be a writer. It's just a great perk, and it really, really helped me. So, with that, thank you for watching. I appreciate you, and I hope everyone has a happy writing week, and I will see you again on the next video. Bye.